Good morning, Illini. Welcome back to Healthy Illini Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schrock. And if you're with us for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. We're really excited to have you be a part of this conversation, part of this community. If you've been with us since the beginning, I appreciate you as well. And we're here with another topic on health and wellness, and I'm excited to have this one. We've been working to try and get this one scheduled for a long time, and we finally have an opportunity to have the conversation. I'm joined today by two guests. First up is a return guest, Matilda Smith-Thompson. She's been on the show before. She's with the Counseling Center here at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. She's a clinical counselor and also the co-chair of the Neurodiversity and Anxious-Related Distress Outreach Team. Matilda, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Matt.
I'm also joined by a senior here at UIUC, Dira Nandini. She is the president of Deep Ranjani here at UIUC. She's majoring in developmental psych, and she's also a counseling center paraprofessional. Dira, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, this actually is going to be a little bit of a not really a follow-up, but related to the podcast we dropped just 1 week ago, which was on autism specifically. If you haven't checked that out, go back 2 episodes. We had a 2-part episode on that we did on autism, and it just happened to fall in the recording and the scheduling that these are back-to-back, which is really good because April is Autism Awareness Month. But in this episode, we want to expand a little bit wider. On that one, we focused a lot on autism, but now we're talking about neurodivergence. And this is a huge topic, and it's not always easy to talk about because there's so much nuance and so much variety to what you're talking about when you start talking about neurodivergence or neurodiversity. But we've heard that term a lot more in the last year, so I think it's an important conversation to have, and it's important to have a familiarity just with at least a little bit with what it means. So hopefully you both can help with that today, and we'll talk about it. So at its core, what is neurodiversity, and why is it so important to have this conversation?
All right, so thanks, Matt. Neurodiversity is the term that is used to describe a wide variety of brain functioning among human beings.
So there's the idea between neurodivergent and neurotypical, and that's kind of where the focus started off with a lot of trying to figure out what neurodivergence is, correct?
That's correct. And so with neurodivergent folks, they share as a group common characteristics that differentiate from neurotypical people. So it would be in the areas of cognition, such as your thinking, your learning, your information processing, and then also the environmental variables, such as communication, social interaction. Those are some of the markers that explain differences between a neurodivergent human and a neurotypical human. So in the past, traditionally, what has happened is neurodivergence was linked to autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, but primarily autism spectrum disorder. And now we're branching out into multiple diagnoses. I already mentioned 2, there's dyscalculia, dyspraxia. There are multiple ways that a brain can function. So the idea is we're shifting more from a clinical understanding of neurodivergence to more of a community identity.
Well, it's one of those things that the more we learn, it's almost like we learn the less we know sometimes.
Right.
And so the more, as there's been more focus on neurodivergence, and it did start a lot with autism spectrum disorder, that's kind of where it started. Like, this umbrella is not wide enough. It doesn't cover all the things because there's this aspect to neurodivergence or this aspect to brain function that is not really falling under autism spectrum, but it's not really what we would call neurotypical at this point. So now we need a wider umbrella. And that's where neurodivergence really seemed to start to gain some prominence. And again, like we talked about in the last episode with autism, is that this is still a fairly new understanding. It's only been in the last, decade, even if that we've started to understand that, oh, this is what this means, and oh, this is what this indicates. So as somebody is starting to notice things or starting to wonder, maybe I am neurodivergent as I start to learn, what are some of those indicators, whether it be in a clinical setting or just simply around the house that I'm noticing? What are some of the markers or activities or interactions that people start to see that start to have them think, this might be where I'm headed?
A lot of the times, I think, informally speaking, that might be in focus. That might be you're having this social pullback like I want to talk to somebody, but I'm having a really hard time talking to them, having a really hard time relating to them. And so these minor differences that they become major slowly and they start to become more persistent. I think that's a way that you can kind of figure out, okay, maybe something is going on here. Maybe I should go and talk to somebody and see what's happening here.
So if somebody is noticing those slight social interaction delays or struggles or whatever it may be, because I think we all feel that sometimes, but what does that take to a level that someone's like, you know what, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with neurodivergence, not just shyness or I'm having an off day kind of thing, but this is developed into more of, I think there's something more here.
Matt, that's when it's going into more of your, like, all of your activities of daily living, and that's usually with a lot of diagnoses. It gets to the point of where it is messing with your daily functioning in multiple domains. So in academics, in the workplace, with your friends, with your family, your interactions with folks are going to be different. Other people may notice it before you do. I remember when I got my ADHD diagnosis, I told my friends, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we knew," and I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, because you did this, and this," and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right." So a lot of the behaviors we're seeing is a mixture of a few things. One, we live in and I'm just gonna say a lot of we because I too neurodivergent. We operate in a neurotypical world. So a lot of the behaviors that we experience, we're afraid sometimes to go into public with these for fear of being shamed, stigmatized, ridiculed, isolated from other people, because the behaviors that we often exhibit can be confusing for neurotypical people, and oftentimes we're pathologized. Those, like, our behaviors are pathologized, and which ultimately just means that seeing a behavior and just automatically labeling it as bad or as not okay, or definitely something that is more of a neurotypical response. As being neurodivergent, what you most likely do in a lot of situations, especially when it's social, is you mask. So masking just simply means that you're suppressing or you're camouflaging these social behaviors to adapt to the environment that you're in. And so these are a lot. If you find struggles with that, if you're finding struggle in your relationships, struggle in your academics, you can't concentrate, and it's getting to the point where it's frustrating, it's exacerbating your sadness, it's exacerbating your mood. We also some of us experience emotions in a completely different way. For a lot of folks, their emotions are heightened. And, a lot of folks talk about, like, feeling stuff very, very deeply. This could be seen as passionate, or it could be seen as, depending on who you are, hysterical. So,
but the other side of it is, and then I want to talk a little bit about the way things manifest, because we're talking about how you interact, but I want to kind of just lay out a couple of examples of the ways neurodivergence can manifest, because until you're talking about, it can be very emotional and sometimes not properly called this, but people will say hysterical, whatever. But then there are also those that are neurodivergent that are so analytical that they almost come across as the complete opposite of emotionless. We know that's not true, but it can. So that's why I say the spectrum is so wide, because you can have somebody who is under that neurodivergent umbrella, who is emotions are very plain to see. They're always at the surface, and then there's others that the emotions seem to be very hidden. In that. So would you share a little bit, and I know, Dear, you put a little bit of this into your prep work as well, in the number of ways that neurodivergence might manifest, and just kind of give an overview of some of those.
Yeah, I mean, so when we say manifest, I mean, neurodivergence, when it comes to ADHD, autism, all these signs are already within us, right? These are genetic markers that are in our biology. They make us different. And these differences come about because of the way that we interact with the world. And so the way that, I'm finding something is feeling off, like socially, how we socially interact, or maybe we're starting to feel really pressured through exams and stuff like that. And then we'll start to realize that, okay, you know what? I've been having a really hard time with exams and focusing and everything. And this is something that has been going on for a while. Or maybe it's the exams and some part of a stressful period that really started this symptom, and then it's persisted. So when it comes to like, and I think I do have a question for you, Matilda. I just was wondering that, do a lot of these, like some of these symptoms of like, we know that autism, ADHD, and a lot of neurodivergent conditions are comorbid. They happen at the same time with anxiety and depression, whether that be social anxiety and different types of phobias. So oftentimes when clients come into therapy, is that sometimes when they realize that, okay, maybe I do have ADHD and maybe that's what's been holding me back, some stuff like that?
So the thing about that is there's some clients do come in with the knowledge that they suspect they have ADHD because there's been people around them that have noticed things, because there is a particular pattern of behavior that has cropped up again and again, and finally the light bulb went on. They're like, oh, this is connected to that. Maybe I need to go get help for this. The other thing that might happen is you discover it with a mental health professional, right? So when you discover it, it could also manifest as something else, because oftentimes folks who experience ADHD symptoms will also have or experience depression and anxiety as well. And so when they're going to get a diagnosis, bless you, what will end up happening is they may not even get that diagnosis. They may get a depression or an anxiety diagnosis to start with. And sometimes it takes a lot of rule out. In my private practice work, I worked with someone who basically had one diagnosis that was given to them by a professional, and it was around a mood. It was around a mood disorder. We're like, okay, it could be, we could do that. We could, and this happens a lot where somebody comes in with a particular diagnosis, but then you find out, there's more to the story, right?
And that comes with masking, right?
Yes, and that's what makes it so hard sometimes.
Yes, and you can't even, sometimes you don't realize until you go to a clinician or until you go to a mental health professional that you are masking,
right?
And that this is something that you've kind of subconsciously hid under.
Also think about the intersections of different situations. Like, for instance, if you've experienced abuse while also experiencing these symptoms, how connected are you going to feel to yourself and your own experience? Let's say, for instance, if someone's gaslighting you, how are you going to conceptualize your own wellness if somebody is telling you this is not what's happening to you? Because that also happens with a lot of neurodivergent people. You have folks that are around them not validating their very real experiences, right?
This can be through abuse, as you mentioned, but also just imagine the family, the cultural different stigma come into play. And they're like, no, that's not possible.
Yeah, that's a lot of it, is that the environment everybody is in impacts how you process things, how you process your own self-image. And so you're right, cultural, familial, ethnic demographic, financial demographics, things like that can really impact how you present yourself. And then if you're trying to navigate this whole idea that I'm already different from everybody, and everybody innately wants to be the same as everybody else, that's just something we all want, no matter where we are anywhere. And so that makes it really complicated. And that's partly why this conversation is so important to have, not just here, but in anywhere we go, to have these conversations about what neurodivergence is, what it means, how it impacts us, things like that. Because in conversation, you get educated, you find truth, you bring light to things. And so that conversation is really, really important. One aspect of interacting with your environment, of how neurodivergence shows itself, that you both put in your prep work, is with sensory concerns, sensory issues, things like that. Would you share just a little bit about what that means and kind of how that might impact somebody?
So when we're talking about sensory sensitivities, we're talking about the ways that sensory experiences affect people, causing distress usually, or be a hindrance to self-regulation. So in focusing on those two things, there's like completely different neuro responses for sensation and perception for neurodiverse people than for neurotypical people. So we're thinking touch, sight, texture, taste, sound. All of those senses are going to be different when you're neurodivergent. Now, it can be very hyper in your mind, like being hyper aware of all
it can overtake everything
and it can overwhelm.
Yeah.
It can overwhelm you. So, for example, you are, oh my gosh, Bonnaroo. I was at Bonnaroo last year. For y'all not familiar with Bonnaroo, it is a huge musical festival where 80,000 people descend upon this like Tennessee farm. And lots of musical acts are there. So last year I saw Kendrick Lamar, Lil Nas X, got a bunch of folks. The issue, it was a lovely place and it sprawled out. The issue is that things got to me, like the noise, being around so many people who are also probably not sober. And so you deal with that. You're dealing with the onslaught and overwhelming feelings of everything that's happening in your brain, in your body, everywhere.
And for some, that's a welcome feeling, that connectivity. And for some, that causes the overwhelming where you just want to disconnect.
That's right. I mean, it can get very, very confusing, but very distressing at times. So the reason why I brought up the Bonnaroo thing is because that's a public place where lots of people are. That would be an environment where a neurodivergent individual would have to put some of their own accommodations in place for their own protection and their own wellness. So I'll just talk about like the tools, like for instance, headphones.
Yep.
We, at least me and a couple other friends, we wear headphones. Just noise canceling ones if we're around like a lot of folks. Fidget tools, anything that we can use, pop tools, anything that like makes noise, and calm strips, things with texture. So interacting with our environment in certain ways that are soothing and that bring us back to the present are going to help us.
And I mean, on campus, for a lot of students, this could look like being uncomfortable being on the bus, because of the sounds that the bus makes when the bus turns, especially.
Lots of folks.
That could also be just at the union. You're feeling very overwhelmed because there's so many people, there's so many things going on. So a lot of different, and it's okay to take a step back, get yourself out of that situation.
Yeah, and sensory can mean so many different things, not just noise, or it can be just the feeling of a close space, how close a chair is to another chair. Well, it can be, what type of shirt you have. If it's a certain material, for some people it can be food texture. I know people who, they don't hate the food, they hate the way the food is prepared because of how it feels in the mouth. Like the flavor they like, they just don't like it that way. And so when we're talking sensory, it can mean so many different things, which makes it hard to talk about and hard to quantify sometimes because it is such a wide spectrum.
Yeah, right. Part of the smells on Green Street, maybe even. So
I know, like there's even just how things feel on your body. I do know at least one individual that wears shoes with thick soles so that there's enough of a buffer between the bottom of their feet and the ground, because feeling the ground is a problem.
Yeah, and that's hard to navigate. And it's hard to navigate, and that's why it's important to talk to people and important to have these conversations to find out what can I do and how can I help somebody else. Which I want to shift gears just a little bit but it's the end of the same idea as of the conversation is, because this is not an easy topic to talk about. If I don't identify as neurodivergent, I am neurotypical as far as I know, but I want to be an ally. I want to support people who are, and I have a son who's on the spectrum, and I want to be supportive, but that's not always easy to do. So do you have any advice for people who want to support friends or family, or are looking for support from friends or family, in how to have those conversations, how to be inclusive, that kind of idea?
Yeah, sure. So this is a lot of what my RSO does, Deep Ranjani UIUC. A lot of what we do is advocate for inclusion, acceptance, awareness, the journey really starts with asking yourself the question, do I know this well enough? And what more do I need to know? It's a lot about that humility factor that we learn as CCPs as well. So a lot of it and what we preach as an RSO is communication, right? Have an open dialogue. Don't be afraid to have an open dialogue. People want to be understood. That's something we all want as humans. Ask, don't assume. Just assuming what somebody is saying, what their behaviors mean. And you also have to understand that as neurotypicals, our world is really, really nuanced. And we understand the nuances right away because we made those nuances. But neurodivergents may not understand that nuance. And I don't blame them. Some of the nuances are not even really necessary. But socially nuanced world, the world is so socially nuanced that it's a very difficult place to navigate. And so that's why you should always ask and never assume. And then also give time for response because, like you said, it's not really easy to talk about. And whether that be through friends, whether that be a family discussion, just give time to respond and be patient, you know?
And, and give time to respond is so important because the person you're asking is not because they don't want to answer or they're not trying to answer. They just may not be sure, like, I don't even know how to answer yet at this point. I'm trying to quantify something that's really hard to quantify. And so that makes it tough if you're demanding an answer and the person wants to get it right because they're talking about this experience they're having. Giving that space is really important in that. So you're right. Giving that time giving time for response is a huge key to it.
Yeah, exactly. Be inviting and don't demand. I mean, words are a really, really big part of communication and the way that we communicate with each other. That says a lot about who we are. That says a lot about the world that we build around us. So be inviting, be soft, I think the golden rule is pretty much, you can implement the golden rule, do as you
do unto others as you have them do unto you. I learned that one young.
All right.
Yeah.
The other part of this that I think you hit on and I want to highlight is that understand what you don't know and be aware of that. But at the same time, don't let that stop you. Because so for some of us, there's this idea that I can't say anything until I know everything. Well, nobody knows everything. Yeah. The foremost leader in the world on any thought subject doesn't know everything. We're always constantly learning. Exactly. And so if you try and wait until you have it all figured out, you're never going to do anything. And that's not going to help anybody. Yeah. Take that first step and say, you know what, I don't know. This is what I think I know. There may be some things I absolutely do know, but there's a lot I don't know. So I'm going to talk to somebody and say, look, I can't understand where you're coming from because I don't experience that. I want to know more, so please share with me on that and help me be somebody that can be a good friend. And that's really the start of the conversation. Yeah. And that opens doors for things because not only are you as an ally stepping up and saying, you know what, I'm putting myself out there to help, the other person knows, they're trying. And even if you get it wrong, sincere trying is appreciated. I can see that you're trying and you're not quite right. We're going to go there and that's okay. I'm going to correct you on some things, but I see that your intent is good. And that's way more important to me than you being knowledgeable and cold.
Yeah. And that's like the benefit of neurodiversity. At the end of the day, from the social perspective, neurodiversity asks us to be a better human being by implementing all this. Don't ask, don't assume, communicate, be patient, all these types of language.
And one of the reasons I wanted to have both of you on is that you are both part of organizations and groups that this is your mission, to help people be educated, to help people get the tools to connect people together, to support people, things like that. So if somebody's listening and they're like, you know what, this sounds really great, but I want to do these things, but I really don't know how. I don't know what the next steps are. I just wish somebody would help me. Let's talk a little bit about your groups and share a little bit about just briefly what you do, and we'll talk about how you contacted. But both the Counseling Center and Neurodiversity and other anxious distress outreach team, Deep Progeny Foundation, I, just if you would share a little bit about what you do and kind of how people can get in contact with you.
Okay. So as one of the co-chairs of the Neurodiversity outreach team, what we are tasked to do is go out into the campus community and spread awareness, education, support, and letting folks know, hey, we're out here, but we also know that y'all are out here. Where are you? Come find us. So it's very important to go where the folks at, and that's through our outreach efforts. One of the ways that folks can reach us is just by calling the center and asking to speak to one of our clinicians or for me or my co-chair, Quincy Courtwright, and we'll be able to supply information, possibly, some collaboration. There's a lot of stop it right there.
And by center, you mean the counseling center, correct?
Yeah,
that's where
the counseling
housed out
center.
at. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. 217-333-3704.
Oh, she has it memorized.
Eventually, you get your own numbers memorized. It takes a while, but you get there because you say it.
Right, exactly. I mean, it used to be back in the day when we had landlines. I had to remember these things, but now, not so much. Got a phone for that.
So that's if you want to reach the neurodiversity outreach team. That's through the counseling center. It's a great way to go. Dira, if you would share a little bit about neurodivergent and kind of what that is and how to contact you.
Sure. I just also want to plug the counseling center in one way. We do have a lot of Tuesdays at 7, workshops that are done Tuesday at 7. We do a lot of tabling, so the counseling center is all over. A lot of the CCPs are leading the tabling, so you can talk to students as well, the bridges between the undergraduates and the professional world. So even if you're not entirely comfortable talking to a clinician just yet, you can always start by talking to a student, a CCP. They'd love to help. So yeah, but Deep Ranjani UIUC, we have an Instagram if you'd like to follow, _UIUC. And a lot of what we do is we do a lot of work with different RSOs, really touching with the undergraduate population itself. We are also hosting a neurodiversity fair next Thursday at from 5 to 8 at the Eikenberry Commons. So you can also visit us there, chat with us, talk to us. We'd love to help you out, get to know more about your experience, get to know more about how we can be better advocates for and with the neurodivergent population. And if you also have questions as neurotypicals and you want to do more work, a lot of self-reflection, self-work, which is a lifetime journey. It's not going to be perfect today, tomorrow. It's a lifetime journey, but that's really what we're about as Deep Ranjani UIUC. That's what we advocate for. So we would love to talk to you. Feel free to reach out via email, Insta, whatever you prefer.
And we'll have all those links in the bio of this episode. You'll be able to click on that and follow up with those as well. If you would give a quick plug about INI, the Illinois Neurodiversity Initiative. We talked about it in the last episode through Autism, so you can also check it out there a little bit more about that as well. But I don't want to miss it here. So if you would just share just a little bit, very briefly about what the mission is and if there's a website they can contact and things like that.
So INI, it stands for Illinois Neurodiversity Initiative, and this is a program for UIUC students that identify as neurodivergent. So it promotes the success of neurodivergent students from orientation to graduation. So this team is supporting students for all 4 years in their academic life, in their social life, their mental health, and also preparing them for the job market. One of the things that INI has been doing all year long is every Wednesday doing a social club dinner. So folks will come and have dinner, but also
talk with Dr. Kramer.
Yep. And she was on the last episode with Autism.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, these run hand in hand.
Yeah.
And you find that with neurodiversity and so many other diagnoses, they run hand in hand. And so it's a good way to kind of bridge the gap between the two. So yeah, that's another event there. And the website for INI is
ini.illinois.edu.
And again, we'll have that in the bio as well. And so that's the INI website on that. And Dira, you had one other that you wanted to share on.
Yeah, so I'm also an intern for TAP, which is the autism program. And what we do is we provide a lot of resources, mainly to younger populations, but we have also had adolescents come in and university students also come in and check out our resources on social communication, on how to time management. We have different books as well that are really good resources. And yeah, so please feel free to visit us. We're at Christopher Hall, right next to INI.
And again, you can find all more, other information about that in the autism episodes we did previous to this. But one distinction to be made on that is TAP, the autism program, is a community-based program anybody can come to, whereas I&I is specific to university students. So that's one designator between the two. But they're both fantastic resources, so feel free to check those out. Guys, I really appreciate you coming in. We could talk about this for hours, and I know there's areas that we could dive into on a deep dive so easily into this. But this was where I wanted to start the conversation because it's such an important conversation to have. So Matilda, Dira, thank you so much for joining us on this program.
Thank you for having us.
The conversation around neurodiversity is growing, as it should, and it's still really honestly in its infancy as far as how much we understand about it and how much it's being addressed and the nuances that are being learned and the resources that are out there. And so there's a lot of questions to ask. There's a lot of answers to find out, to be educated in. So if you have any of those questions, if you're curious, if you have any feedback, please reach out to us here at Healthy Illini and reach out to the Counseling Center, I&I, DeProgeny. These are places that are welcoming and want to be a part of the conversation with you and want to help you understand who you are, who your friends are, and the environment that you're in. So please reach out, ask those questions, and let us come alongside with you. But thank you for joining us today. You are on a personal journey no matter where you are in it. You are important and you matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter. And we're here to keep you well to excel. So go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you next time on Healthy Illini.